Hello and welcome to another edition of Meet the Manager. Here we chat to a fancy Premier League manager with a stellar record of success. We'll find out their strategies for a top finish, look back at their career and see how they are doing in the current season, which is 2019-20. Sort of a snapshot of how their decisions go. My name is Joe and today I'm joined by Tom Freeman, who is also known as AVFC 82. The 82 is important for Villa fans. And he is known as that by Fantasy Football Scout regulars as well. So, Tom, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Joe. Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you on. It's always good to meet managers like yourself. Now, you're involved in Fantasy Football Scout as well as a pro pundit and also behind the scenes in some moderating duty. But the reason we've got you on here now is because of your career history. So I'm going to put a picture up of your career history. And, I was amazed when I saw it. And let's hope others are too. So there we go. Pretty nice career history, I would say. 8 top 10,000 finishes out of 10 years. Okay. And of these, you finished in the top 1,000 on half of those occasions. And as we can see here, 214th. So you've got top finishes when you started a decade ago, and you were 214th last year. So the game has changed since then. I'm going to hazard a guess that you've adapted well to those changes. But thinking of things like rising popularity, lots of social media discussion about it as well. But, what have been the key changes for you and how have you adapted to them?
Well, the game has obviously, like you mentioned, got a lot more popular. I think it's up to 7 million players, I think now. So I think that, there's obviously that challenge, that it's more competitive in that sense. And I think it's maybe got a touch easier for the casual player now with that kind of volume of information out there. People are getting alerts to their phone when there's a blank game week or a double game week. It seems like information can be spoon-fed a little bit easier to you. But I suppose that's part of the challenge now. I think when I started out, Fantasy Football Scout was the main resource for information. I know Nick Triggerlipser you've had on had a blog. A guy called Chris Clever had one as well, and that was fantastic. It was a place where you go and you could get some real kind of insight into data and their decisions and their way of playing. But now, I mean, my strategy I don't think has changed much since the early days. It's just got more competitive and just generally harder because of the numbers and the amount of players there are playing now.
Yeah, I mean, I put in my notes, I didn't say it just then, but when I talked about social media, I talked about social media noise. And I find that a lot of managers I speak to, including, my own thoughts as well, as someone who's been playing for over 10 years, is the thing that I've noticed most is that flow of information that comes in. You've got stats for everything. You've got expected stats coming. There's so much information. People looking at form, people looking at fixtures. What for you are the kind of key influences there? Let's start off with, before we go into strategy, looking at stats. What stats do you look at, if any?
Well, I'm generally quite busy, so I kind of limit it. On a kind of a Monday, I'll look at 3 things. I'll look at shots from the weekend's game, shot locations and created chances. And I can do that. I've built a little custom table in the members area. You can kind of dip into it quite quickly. You can get all that information out of it. And that just then it gives me the opportunity to kind of dive further into it as the week progresses. But that's just like a little those 3 statistics are the ones that I'll look at on a Monday from the weekend. But there is so much information out there that I suppose you have to find your trusted sources because it's too overwhelming to take everything in.
Just thinking with those stats. So, for example, let's take a player like Jamie Vardy, occasionally Anthony Martial as well this season. So they maybe score, they maybe don't. But then you look at the stats and it's like maybe one shot and it's maybe off target and that's it. Or maybe they've had one shot and it's on target and that's their goal. How do you look at that and decide whether that's a player you want to keep or get in, or whether you think there's other stats or other things to look at?
I think the eye test, I mean, loads of people talk about it, but that's important. I think previous experiences with somebody like Vardy, he's a player I've owned, quite a bit in previous years. Unfortunately, not that much in the year that Leicester won the league, when that rank which you saw at the beginning, the 181,000, was that season. And I probably didn't have Vardy when I should have, but the rest of the time I have had him. And so I think just those stats that I look at the beginning of the week are something that, it immediately flags up at anybody who's taking a lot of shots, where they're shooting, who's creating chances. But then as the week kind of goes on, then you can kind of look at other things like that. And that's when maybe somebody like Vardy would kind of, become an option. But he's obviously not going to be showing up on a lot of those stats that I'm looking at on a Monday.
Okay, so I mean, that's the kind of, I suppose, part of the basics of what you do each week. And there's really good advice there about going into that members area if you're a member in Fantasy Football Scout, getting your own table. I do that as well. I've got my own table.
And you can customise it, can't you, to how you want. If you want penalty area touches, if you're a fan of XG, you can stick that in there, and you just tailor it. I mean, time is the thing for me. I need something quite quickly, and those three stats have been something which I look to. Yeah,
it's quite good to look at the game week that's gone, then look at 4 game weeks, and then the season, just to see how it all marries up. What about other sort of tried and tested rules that have helped you? So you look at that career, and I was talking on social media, even this week, and on a regular basis, people will say, oh, FPL, it's all about luck. It's not about skill or strategy. I look at that career history, there's no way that's luck every year. You can't be lucky every year. So what are your tried and tested rules over the years?
Well, I think that you obviously need a bit of luck if you're going to try and get into that. Sometimes you just get a feeling that things are going well, and the 50-50 calls you're making are kind of coming off. But in terms of things that I do, I mean, I've watched quite a few of these Meet the Manager videos, and a lot follow similar themes, understandably so. They talk about patience with players, but then maybe being aggressive when you need to. They talk about consistency, bit of luck. I think something which you've spoken about before, team structure. Yeah. And getting that structure in place so you can move targets quite easily without having to necessarily take point hits.
Yes.
So, and all of that, which is, really good advice. Everybody should go and watch those videos. But things which I do, team value is important to me, and the fact that I don't obsess over team value. I make my transfers later in the week. 9 out of 10 times it will be on a Friday. And naturally, because I'm making those later transfers in the week, I'm losing out on point ones here. Sometimes players are dropping, sometimes are playing going up. And I don't make transfers later in the week because I'm worried about players getting injured or anything like that. It's simply because my decision making is much better later in the week than what it would be earlier in the week. If you asked me to make my transfers on a Sunday or a Monday, they would be very, very different to what I do on a Friday. And that is, it's simply because I need that time in the week to kind of, really think about my strategy, to delve in a bit deeper. We talked about stats on a Monday. You can kind of get those stats out, and then you need that time to kind of look into it further. I like watching the midweek games. I sometimes find the Champions League or EFL Cup or whatever's going on, you can get really valuable information from that. Press conferences. So I always make my transfers later in the week, which has a knock-on effect of team value, but I don't obsess over it.
No, that's something. It's interesting because we'll come to your kind of current game week and this season in a bit, but something I did notice that was different in your team. It's significantly smaller than the team value of many other teams I've seen, and so many people, though, I've spoken before about people cheering price rises, and they always say you've got to get those price rises, they're so important for the end of the season, they're so important for now. You just proved completely opposite. They're not important at all, because you can get the top 1,000 finishes while not looking at team value. So do you find that, how do you resist?
I mean, simply because I've done these kind of tests in the past where I've noted what transfers I'd make on a Sunday and a Monday, and then I'll come to a decision on a Friday, and it is just my decision making is better later on in the week. And we talk about, it giving you an advantage in that second half of the season when you're playing maybe a wild card or whatever, or a free hit or whatever you're doing. But there's always a solution. There's always a player who's 2 or 3 million less than another player who is either in form or you can see something from watching a game. And it's an advantage having a bit more money, but it's never held me back, and it's kind of the way I've always played. And giving myself time. I mean, earlier this season, I think we had just come off the back of game week 5, and I gave myself a bit of time. I think it was only a Tuesday or Wednesday when I started looking at captain strategy for the next few weeks. Now, I immediately spotted in game week 7 that I had owned Salah and Sterling had been my go-to captains up until that point. I think Salah was at Sheffield United, and I know from being a Villa fan, I'd watched a lot of Sheffield United in the Championship last season, and that just, I wasn't keen on sticking the armband on in that week. And Sterling was at Everton, so I started to look, and that's when Vardy popped up for me. And I looked at Vardy. I think he played Tottenham game week 6, but Tottenham have been struggling on the road for quite a long time now. But it was all about game week 7 when they were at home to Newcastle, and I got him in for that. And it was because I gave myself that time in the week to kind of really sit down and work on a strategy. If you'd asked me to make that transfer on a Sunday, I wouldn't have had that time to do that. And it obviously paid off with that Vardy decision. And did well for me. But again, I'm not obsessed with losing 0.1s on players. I think David Silva, I went with David Silva over Kevin De Bruyne game week 1 this year. And I don't know if you can remember, but game week 2, City were at home against Spurs. Silva was dropped to the bench. It wasn't that surprising. The same thing happened last year with David Silva in the corresponding fixture. And Kevin De Bruyne, without David Silva in the team, he was almost playing as a second striker. He got a huge haul. Yeah. I come out of game week 2, everybody's on Kevin De Bruyne. I've got David Silva. He's dropping in price, but I thought I've got to give myself more than 2 weeks with this, and I did. I think that David Silva got 3 double-digit hauls in the next 4, and you make that price back. So you've lost 0.1, but you gain 0.1. So if you've got faith in that player, I wouldn't let a price drop dictate what I'm going to do. Give it time. And another player, Mason Greenwood, I've had him since game week 1. I think he's dropped 0.2 now. I'm not going to use a transfer on it. You just got to accept it. You can make money in other areas. And like I say, there's always a solution in that second half of the season, even though I'll be up against managers with probably a couple of million more to spend than me.
Another thing we'll talk about a bit later is going for differentials and well-owned players. And so there's a particular player like Mason Mount that we will speak about later, but I just use him as an example because he's a player that you've actually got rid of. You've got in and then you got rid of. So you've obviously made profit on him over those weeks, and at the same time you've cashed that in. You've cashed that in rather than thinking, oh no, I'm going to lose value on Mason Mount. You've thought, hey, Mason Mount's just made me some money. Is that the way that you think about it when transferring out players that you've made a bit of money on?
I think that's interesting because it's that mid-price midfielder position is something where I probably spend the most amount of time looking at it. I love the position. I love the kind of the price point. And with Mason Mount, I'd owned him for a few weeks. He hadn't done much wrong, but this goes back to the last point. I had watched the midweek Champions League game against Lille. Mount had just, to me, he looked a little bit tired. Hudson-Odoi had come off the bench, and he kind of changed the game. He got an assist, and it's a position I like to be quite aggressive with. I think you can get away with it because these players aren't going to be widely captained. No. So I think, and I think the majority of my transfers this season, I think I've made 11. I think probably 5 or 6 of them have been these mid-price midfielders. And I started with David Silva. I've moved to Martial. I then went to Mount. I've had Hudson-Odoi. I really wanted Grealish. I wrote a hot topic on it for the site ahead of Brighton, but fixtures put me off post-Brighton a little bit. I've got Walcott now, which we'll probably talk about a bit later. And I just feel that you can be quite aggressive. You can have a bit of fun with that position. There's just a lot of options. I mean, I look at it now, and you've got Pulisic, you've got Maddison, you've got Tillemans, Trossard, McNeil. There's just so many options in there, and it's where I focus most of my time probably in the team.
I mean, you mentioned trigger lips that we have spoken about, to before in the Meet the Managers series, and something him and myself do a lot is have price points, so it makes it easier to make transfers in and out. Yeah. What you're saying there is a similar theme, but there is a key difference there. It's not so much price points; it's sort of differential points. So you look at your 15 and your starting 11, and you go, right, that slot there, the fourth midfielder, I'm going to have some fun with that one. But exactly. I'm not gonna have so much fun with the other guys who are well owned, and I want a captain. They can just stay put.
You don't want to get caught out by those guys, those big hitters who are going to captain you. You don't want to be personally, I don't move them around too much, and it's that position which is a fourth midfielder slot for me. I think I had two of them earlier on in the season. I started the season with Perez at Leicester, like a lot of people did as well. But yeah, it's just a good price point. Like you say, you can have a bit of fun with it. I don't get attached to value. You can be aggressive. Walcott's come in for these 3 fixtures. After Norwich, he's out, and it will be somebody else.
Okay, looking at your other tried and tested rules over your career, anything else you want to mention before we talk about hits and chips? Any other tried and tested rules?
Something I do in pre-season is I spend quite a bit of time on the newly promoted clubs because I think there's massive amounts of value in them, and I think sometimes there's a misclassification, as we've seen with Lundstram this year, and I think it's worth putting a bit of time into that in pre-season, even if you don't want to start with these newly promoted players game week 1. I think that just having that knowledge so you can move quickly, you can get a bit ahead of the curve with it, because your kind of more general managers out there probably won't have that knowledge of the teams coming up. And we've been lucky. I mean, we had Wolves last year with Doherty, Jimenez, Jota towards the end of the season offered brilliant value. This season we've had Sheffield United and to maybe a lesser extent Villa and Norwich, but even with Villa, McGinn and Grealish have had their moments. Pukki at Norwich, I know he's kind of faded out now, but I think it was game week 2 when he hit his hat-trick, 2 or 3. If you would have gone in with that knowledge about him, then you might have been more inclined to make that move for that Newcastle game at home. And you look at Sheffield United now, and I think have you got the defensive double up, Joe?
I have, yeah, and I got that for just to explain why, for a couple of reasons. One is I spend a lot of time on goalkeepers for some reason. I really like to get a goalkeeper pairing, and I tend to get a pairing of 2 goalkeepers I think will get points for me in a good rotation, of which Henderson and Pope is currently a good one. The other reason is because I've got Lundstram, and I was one of those early adopters for him. So, but I'm not sure I want to play him every week, but I like the backup of having Henderson. Is that why you do things like a defensive double up? Is it something it gives you that kind of security blanket if you want to bench one of them, but at the same time, is it a good differential as well?
Yeah, I mean, I do like it. I mean, I think with Sheffield United, they've offered, such good value. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to have the best defensive record at the end of the season, but if you can kind of get them in place for a good fixture run, I've been on Henderson and Lundstram since the start of the season. Yeah. And an article I wrote last week, I was actually thinking about a triple up possibly further down the line with either O'Connell or Stevens or something like that. Because I think, you can pick these players up for, Lundstram was 4, Henderson was 4.5 when I got him. Even Stevens now I think is 5.1. There's really good value in those. So if you spot something, if you're watching games, they look defensively solid, then I'm not against a double up or a triple up if the fixtures fall kindly.
I think the good advice there as well, something that we've spoken before about Lundstram, is on Fantasy Football Scout we have David and Neil do the look religiously at the minutes played and where people are playing in pre-season matches. Sometimes you just get, sometimes it's like the B team effectively, but sometimes you get those gems, and that revealed Lundstram there. And you mentioned with your own side Villa as well, another thing that those like yourself who're watching Villa, about McGinn. He's old news to you. That he makes incredible runs into the box that will take opponents by surprise. That's new to FPL players this season, but
exactly.
another
And
good
yeah,
example.
and all you need to do really. I mean, Fantasy Football Scout put up quite a few articles over the summer. And it was great because you got the writer talking about it, but I can remember you spoke to journalists in the local area, you spoke to bloggers. That's where you get a real bit of insight into the clubs. And so you can just jump on Fantasy Football Scout, to be honest, and you get a lot of the information. I wrote some hot topics as well on it, which went up. And, you can look at, previews or whatever and just try and get familiar with the manager, the systems they're playing.
Yeah.
And just so you've got a bit of knowledge so you can move quickly, really, if you spot something.
What about hits? You've only had one hit this season. Is that you tried and tested rule, or do you sometimes you take loads of hits, sometimes you don't?
I wouldn't say it's a rule. I mean, I tend to make 3 or 4 a season.
That's not many.
Yeah, I mean, I think with good planning you don't need to take hits, but that's not to say sometimes I appreciate that you have to if you're unfortunate with injuries, suspensions, form. So I'm not kind of preaching that kind of, sometimes you have to be adaptable.
Yeah.
But it's quite rare I'd make a hit. I mean, I think I made one this year and it was largely because of Abraham. I think he was leading the captain poll. I didn't go in. I think it was Brighton he was playing at home. And it felt like the kind of game he was hitting some, he was putting up some good numbers, and I wanted him in, but I kind of didn't want to. I didn't captain him that week, but I didn't want to go in knowing that he was going to be so widely captained without him at all. And so I kind of thought that was worth getting him in, and I wanted him anyway. So I made that kind of decision to take a hit, and it's. I don't think he got much. I think he got 2 points that week, but. It's those kind of situations where I'm maybe missing a player who I think will do well, and then I'll consider taking a hit. But it's certainly not something I regularly do.
No, okay. What about chips as well? You've still got your wild card. Obviously, the other chips as well, because it tends to be with managers like you I speak to, things like triple captain and etc. tend to be left until the end of the season. But yeah, your first wild card's still intact. So do you have any plans to use it, and why is that usual to leave it so late?
Yeah, I don't normally play it that early. I normally wait till November, unless things are. I mean, that season, which I had a poor season, I played it early that year.
Okay.
But everything else, I've kind of held on to it a bit, and now I'm kind of looking at. I mean, the thing is with the wild card, you've always got that kind of urge to use it. Sometimes it can be a bit of a weight off your shoulder playing it just so it's done, But I mean, I'm kind of looking ahead now, and I'm thinking there might be a bit of an opportunity, possibly around that Liverpool kind of blank coming up. Might be, I know they've got, they're going off to the Club World Championship, so there might be an opportunity there. But I'm not. There's nothing set in stone at the moment. I'll use it when I need to use it. I tend to use the second one quite late around the doubles. So even if I'm using it end of November, I'm still going to get a really good run, a few months of using it before I kind of plug in the second one. So
here's a question though that. I don't tend to ask a lot of those I speak to on Meet the Manager, but they tend to tell me anyway. Now this is a weird one. Who is your opponent? Now the reason I ask that is because for some people it's the 7 million other people playing the game.
Yeah.
For some people, so myself, I tend to look at the top 10,000, whether I'm in it or not. I tend to look at that because they're the ones that are high up, so they're obviously making changes that are working. Some people, like Simon March, who's won the game, he says his opponent is himself. And sometimes it's your own decisions, your own biases. Sometimes you've got to fight against. But what for you? Who is your opponent?
I've had seasons in the past where it's been a mini league. I mean, I think if you go back to that season, I finished 16k. I mean, my rank took a hit because I went into the last day of the season. It was quite a competitive mini league I was in. And I wanted some differentials. I'd built a wild card a couple of weeks before to kind of go against an opponent. And I think on the last day of the season, I went with Jesus as a captain. The opponent went with Kane. I didn't have him at all. And I think I went into that last day around about 5k. And then, I mean, Jesus scored, but Kane got a double and the rank took a bit of a hit. So sometimes it can be a mini league, but generally it's trying to set targets. This season, I'm trying for a 6 top 1,000 finish. I'm always looking at the Fantasy Football Scout Hall of Fame. It'd be great to kind of finish the season, higher up than I was. I think I'm 9 at the moment, so it'd be great to improve on that. And then there's little leagues like Elite 64 and things like that, and there's always a kind of challenge there to kind of win that. So it varies, but generally it will be kind of targets that I set myself in terms of overall rank.
Just before we look at your current season, your current game week, I just wanted to just flag up that 2015-16. That 181,000. Okay, so you've mentioned there some of the things you did slightly differently, as in you used your wildcard earlier, you tend to use it later. So you've got various strategies and rules, and you sort of went against it that season. What else went wrong that season?
It was an odd season in the fact that Leicester won the league, and I didn't jump on your Vardis and your Mahrez's early enough. I think there was a lot of value in that defence that year with Fuchs and Morgan and Simpson as well. And I probably went for too many differentials too early. Okay. Trying to claw myself back in, trying to be a bit too clever maybe. I can remember captaining Walcott, funnily enough, in back-to-back game weeks over Christmas. And little things like that. I mean, coming out of that season, I probably learnt the most out of that season than I did out of any season playing. But yeah, I mean, you hear it on the boards now and on the forum and talking to people who are maybe struggling a little bit, and they're looking for differentials already at this time of year and filling their team with them. And all I'd say is just pick the players you think are going to get the most points for right now. The differentials can come later in the season, but certainly that season I was just trying to be a bit too clever.
Okay. So I mean, we talked about your kind of, I talked about price points and differential points as well. The whole of having that blend of well-owned, good performing players, but also that slot for a differential. That structure seems to be much more effective for you, because that wasn't something you went for in 2015-16.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, you need your coverage from the teams, from your big teams, those well-owned players that you think are going to do well, and maybe just put aside 1 or 2 spots for those kind of positions where you can be aggressive and get a couple of differentials in. Okay,
let's turn to this season. You are riding high in the rankings at 20,000, so well on course for another good finish. You've been inside the top 1 million since game week 5 as well. So we're going to put your team up now. So I'll just, for the benefit of those listening on the podcast, I'll describe it, and then we can discuss the players in a sec. So you've got Henderson in goal, and Lundstram double up there. We mentioned before. You've got Tomori in from Chelsea, Rico and Alexander-Arnold. They complete your 4-4-2 structure that you're going for at the moment. You've got De Bruyne in there, Walcott, Salah, Sterling, and up front Abraham and Vardy, who you captained last week, and as you said, is a good captaincy shout. On the bench you've got Button, Montoya, Dendoncker and Greenwood. So your setup is a 4-4-2. Greenwood and Dendoncker, you forget about them slots. I've got in my notes here that have you gone for 4-4-2 because there are lots of good defenders currently, so the likes of Rico and Lundstram. And how does that reflect on your kind of search for balance with your squad?
Yeah, well, I started the season with a 4-4-2, but it was different to the way it looks now. I went in quite relatively heavy at the back with Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think I had Laporte in there as well. But as the season's kind of progressed, I find myself wanting to play 4 defenders each week. Yeah. I've got Trent in there. I've got Tomori, who I'll probably play most weeks, and then there's just been so much value with Lundstram and Rico and Montoya, and now the Soyuncu's come into the fore a little bit, and I just always find myself wanting to play those four defenders. So it's naturally kind of taken that kind of structure to the side, really.
Okay, I mean that's something that I've noticed the hard way this last few weeks. Every week I've benched a defender that has got me points. Rico, Soyuncu, others it's been Lundstram. Yeah, I want to play 4 at the moment. So for me personally, Mount is the one that I'm not bothered with suddenly.
Yeah.
4-3-3. So similar, similar strategy there, just obviously a different makeup. Your plan for the next few weeks. So you're talking about setting your captaincy's strategy in advance as well. Liverpool's fixtures get better. Man
Yeah.
City's get marginally worse, but it's Man City, so do they really have a worse? But yeah, are there any plans around that? You've got Salah there, you've got your vice captain on him for last game week, so obviously he's in your thoughts. You've still got Sterling there and Vardy. So yeah, what's your thoughts around the captaincy and also kind of moving around that Liverpool fixture swing that looks quite interesting over the next few weeks?
Well, in terms of captaincy, my immediate thought was Sterling, but obviously there's been a bit of noise over the past 24 hours with him missing the England game, so we're just going to have to kind of wait and see how that pans out. I remember the City-Chelsea game last year, which I think City won 6-0 at home against Chelsea. And I know this is a different Chelsea side now, but, Jorginho, Kante were in there last year and City tore them apart. So my immediate thought was to go there. I'm not too keen on the moment in captaining a Liverpool player at Palace. I don't know, it just doesn't sit right just quite at the moment. So we'll kind of monitor that and then have a look at it. Vardy, I think, is at Brighton. It's a possibility, but at the moment I'm kind of looking towards Man City. I've also got a goalkeeper problem in that Henderson is ineligible to face Man United, his parent club. I only have Button, who's a non-playing keeper. So now I've got to kind of work. I've got 2 free transfers. But the problem is that I'm going to want Henderson back straight away. So I've got to work out whether it's worth making a transfer and then getting him back in. I think I could sell him for 4.6 and then I'll be buying him back for 4.7. So that's a consideration. Do I play 10? It's a possibility. I need to kind of look into that a little bit more. I had a look at keepers the other day, and I think if you're going to make a 1 week kind of punt on one, you might look at Foster, possibly Pope or Gazzaniga or something like that. And I can just see it now. You bring them in, you use a transfer, they get 2 points, and then you want Henderson back straight away. Yeah. And so that's kind of something to look at. And yeah, in terms of Liverpool, fixtures are getting better. I've thought about maybe moving back to Robertson, but I need to give myself a bit of time on that. And there's a lot of international football to be played. There could be some injuries that pop up, or the Sterling situation, for instance. I think there's murmurs of a Salah kind of ankle issue ongoing. So we just need to kind of look at that and then start looking a little bit deeper into it next week, I think.
I mean, obviously, there's lots going into that decision, but a lot of managers are thinking of a Liverpool triple up at the moment, either a defensive double up and one of Salah Mane, or both Salah and Mane and one of Robertson or Alexander-Arnold. Are you minded to do a triple up, or is that triple up a bit too far for you?
No, I could do a triple up. I think that the question that loads of people are asking now is, do you want to do a defensive double up with them and then one of Salah or Mane, or do you just want the one defender like Trent, and then do you want Salah and Mane? Now, there's obviously, if you want that, then it's obviously eating up a lot of your budget, and can you fit a City midfielder in as well? And do you want them? I mean, people might be moving away from that. I personally don't feel comfortable with that. I'm going to want Sterling or De Bruyne in there. So yeah, at the moment I'm probably leaning towards a defensive double up out of the 2. But again, we'll look at it in a bit more detail over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we come back to coming full circle. Really, it's one of the first things you spoke about is giving yourself time. And for big decisions like that, especially with ongoing injury issues, maybe other issues involved, with footballing trends as well, you're not sure. You've got to keep your eye on current affairs. I mean, especially with the Sterling situation as well, with rumoured to have a bust up with Gomez and training. Yeah, lots of things like that. Lots to contend with as well. Let's come back to Walcott then. So lots of people are looking at your team. They're looking at your career stream saying, "Why is this guy got Walcott in?"
Fair enough.
Yeah, and so I've had a look at your route to Walcott. So yeah, you've got Martial in that role. and then you went to Mount. So Martial went out because he got injured, then to Mount, but then Mount got really well owned, and then he moved to Hudson-Odoi, another good differential, and then Hudson-Odoi was revealed to be not able to compete as effectively with Pulisic for that wing spot there, and then you moved to Walcott as well. So another, he's actually looking good in the eye test, Walcott, but maybe not the FPL points that we'd all love to see. So yeah, tell me about that, a little bit about why you've gone for Walcott in that. We know why you're going for a differential role, but why Walcott and not, say, McGinn or another?
That's an interesting one, because I got in Hudson-Odoi, I think it was ahead of Southampton. After that Lille match I'd watched, and I thought that was the time to move. And he did well, to be fair. He got an assist at Southampton, he got an assist against Newcastle and picked up maximum bonus. But then I think the following game he was dropped to the bench after that, and I think Pulisic came in and did quite well. And so again, it goes back to that being quite aggressive, and he was straight out for me. I looked at Grealish. I did a good hot topic on him, which I wanted to move for him, but fixtures. I think he played Brighton at home, but then the fixtures kind of it was City, it was Liverpool, and so I started looking around for midfielders, and I went back to that thing where I looked at shots over the past two game weeks before I brought him in, and I looked at shots in the box over that period as well, and Walcott was top.
Okay.
And so then I started delving in a little bit deeper. He had got man of the match at home against West Ham, I think it was, and Everton in that game had generally looked a lot better. They had gone with Andre Gomez and Tom Davies, I think, in central midfield, and they just generally looked a bit more fluid. They were pressing better. And then there was a midweek EFL Cup game, and Walcott was on the bench for that. He came on at half time, and again he changed the game. So it was kind of like the past two games, tie that in with the stats, which should look good. And I knew it was Walcott. I know he comes with inconsistencies, but I was looking for somebody. I couldn't stretch to a Maddison or anything like that. So I looked at Walcott. I looked at those fixtures. He played Tottenham, who he's got a bit of history with, obviously with his Arsenal connections. Then it was Southampton and Norwich. And I thought I'd roll the dice with it a little bit. I mean, I quite like watching Walcott in terms of his positioning. He always seems to be on the shoulder of the last man. He's quite, and I know his final ball kind of lets him down. But I thought he was unlucky against Southampton at the weekend. I think he created a few chances. And look, I'll give him Norwich. That was always the plan, to give him 3 games, and then he'll be moved on, and then we'll start to look at maybe going back to a Villa midfielder, maybe Trossard, possibly Tielemans, who I know you've got in your team, and or Maddison or something like that. So there's lots of players you can kind of look at there. But I know a lot of people kind of criticise the move, but if stats and fixtures align, and you can have a bit of fun with it. I'm not bothered about what people are saying about it. We'll see how it goes.
I think it's really interesting. I think it's something that we haven't had on the Meet the Manager series before. Obviously, someone being absolutely gung-ho about Walcott for a while, but it's also just the fact that it's just going for that differential point. You mentioned that I've got Tielemans in that role, and you also mentioned Trossard there. So I've got in the back of my mind that role could be Trossard, because I like that. I've got in mind it could be Grealish when he comes back from injury. It could be McGinn, and I think that from what you're saying as well, it sounded important that you've got a few candidates there. So it's not just Walcott. It's like,
it goes back to that price point. It's such a good price point. There's so much value to be had there, and you can kind of try and get ahead of people a little bit with some good picks, I think. So.
Yeah, no, interesting. I like that, and we don't see a lot of 4-4-2 setups, but your one clearly works, and it's working for this season. But just before we go, I just wanted to mention the members area. that you talked about some of the pre-season stuff in there as well, and the importance of getting like a table, and that's something I have as well, and I find it very useful because it's something really quickly on a Monday you can have a look at and go, right, who actually, what story's being told there? What has the eye test not told me? And it gives a rounder picture. But just finally, was there anything else you wanted to add, or to anything else that I haven't asked about and you're dying to tell people?
All I'd probably say to people is just play your own game. Don't get too influenced by others. That goes back to the Walcott kind of thing. Following the template can work very well at times, but at others you can move away from a bit and just try and have a bit of fun with it. And just play your own game and do what you want to do, and don't get too influenced by others and what they're saying.
Good advice. Tom, good luck with the next game week. Good luck in your search for yet another top finish this season. Thanks so much for joining me. Goodbye, Tom.
Great. Thanks, Joe. See you soon.